Number 9, during a dispute about safety concerns at the construction site that might lead towards some sort of litigation, A, the architect's fate depends on what they have said on the site. B, the contractor is always responsible for what happens on the site. C, the owner is the one in control of the site and therefore controls safety issues. D, the architect is only responsible for the design intent. So these all sound fairly plausible. The one that is absolutely not true in the way that it's written is C. The owner always has a certain level of control about the site because they own it. But from a safety issues, like it just wouldn't be reasonable to assume that the owner knows about how to deal with safety when you're digging a trench or when there's a precast wall being put up, but it's a windy day. Like that's a detail that only really the contractors would be able to know. This is not reasonable to think that the owner could have anything real to say about safety. So C, definitely not true. B, the contractor is always responsible for what happens on the site. That is essentially true, but there's a better answer. And part of the reason is, again, it's that word always. There are all kinds of things that happen on a site that the contractor can't control. It might be that the owner is doing something and they have the right to do things. It's their site. And there are things, if the owner is doing it, the contractor can't necessarily control that. So they can't be responsible for everything. They are generally responsible for whatever happens on the site. It's also generally true that the architect is only responsible for design intent. Again, the word only is the tricky part there. The actual answer here is A, and it seems like a kind of a nutty one. But if you just hear me out for a second, if something is going to go towards litigation, there's a safety concern on the site, the architect's fate depends on what they have said on the site. What that means is, if you've walked on the site and you said, wow, that's really unsafe over there, you should fix that. You should put a railing up. Or this wall is unsteady, you should do something about that. What you just did in that process was accept all of the liability for all of the safety on the job site. I know that sounds a little nutty, and it's probably true that nobody has ever told you this, and you've probably said something like that on a job site, but you shouldn't. The safety issues are the concern of the contractor. If you have a safety issue that you are worried about, you can have a conversation with them. You just can't tell them what to do. You can ask if they want advice about it. You can add, like there's various things you can do, but you can't walk onto a job site and say, change that, put a railing over there, do something. Because in that process, legally, you are assumed now to have taken on all of the safety issues. Even if the safety concern that went into litigation wasn't the thing you were talking about. Like if you said there should be a railing at that elevator pit, but then somebody fell into one of the trenches being dug and a pipe got dropped and they broke their leg, you were talking about the elevator pit, but in that process, you took on the liability of safety. Therefore, you would be sued. You would be suable, let's say it that way. You wouldn't necessarily be sued, but you would be suable in that litigation because of what you said on the site. So that's a tricky one. Sorry, but it's an important one to understand. Just because there are sort of general rules of the road doesn't mean you can do whatever you want. You actually have to follow those rules of the road, and if you say things that don't follow those, then the contracts change. And they change without anybody saying, oh, by the way, we've just changed the contract, because it changes by itself. It's just the nature of it. They take the notes that say, architect said this, which nobody will ever read ever again unless there's a problem, at which point some lawyer for an insurance company is rifing through every one of those notes. They find that note that says the architect told me to put the railing in, suddenly everything changes. It's now a different insurance company that's going to have to pay for that, and that's how that stuff rolls.
Don, I'm with you. I never would have guessed that answer either.
Yeah,
Mike got me on that one too.
I apologize.
Although I am getting the always there, so I was uncomfortable with my answer of B because of your always in there.
Yeah, yeah, and again, I actually think it would be written a little differently on the actual exam. The point of this one is really just to hammer home that idea that when you're on a job site, there is meaning to what you're saying, and you have to be careful to follow the protocols and to follow the, like, who's responsible for what. A similar thing would be said, an example I've given before, let's say you walk onto the job site and you say, you see the painters and they're painting the wrong color, and you walk on and say, hey, stop, you're painting the wrong color, stop. Well, that seems reasonable because they're painting the wrong color and you don't want them to continue if they're painting the wrong color. But you saying stop means you've taken responsibility for the schedule. Now, you can say, why are you painting that color? Like, that's a conversation, that's a reasonable conversation. And then you might go and talk to the GC, and then the GC will either tell you, oh, the owner came to us and said, you're always choosing that putrid brown color. He hates that brown color, but he didn't want to hurt your feelings, so he told us to use the bright blue. There might be some totally reasonable answer. Or it might be that they're painting the wrong color, and that you telling the GC says, wait, this doesn't look like the right color. The GC then looks it up, they go talk to the painter. There's a protocol to how that should work. But you saying stop to the painter gives you control of the schedule, which may not seem like a big deal, but what if there's penalties if the schedule goes over? What if they go over and they have to pay $1,000 a week for every week they're over, and they're over by 10 weeks? Well, again, somebody's looking through those notes and they say, look at that. They took control of the schedule on month 3, so therefore we're not going to pay those penalties. So it's one of those things that what you say on the site, the specific way you say it, is meaningful. Now, when you're on a site, things are more complicated than this, and people are trying to be friendly and help each other out. So, don't fret about these things. It's just know that there are protocols, and that those protocols have contractual meaning. And potentially, if there's litigation, big meaning.